You lost, sweetheart? This is a Marine Corps combatives pit, not a yoga class. Civilians stand behind the rope. Staff Sergeant Brett Calloway said it loud, so the men running the perimeter could hear it, so they could grin. The woman in the center of his sawdust pit did not grin. She did not answer. She stood with her weight set evenly over both feet, hands loose at her sides, and looked at him the way a surveyor looks at ground. It was 05:30. The field was still half night. Frost held the grass at the edges where the floodlights did not reach, and the chain-link fence behind the pit ticked in a thin wind off the hills. A platoon was strung out along the running track in ragged files, breath smoking, boots punching the cold. The combatives' pit sat apart from them, a square of raked sawdust ringed by a single drooping rope, and Calloway owned it the way a man owns a thing no one has ever taken from him. The woman wore plain athletic clothes, gray, unmarked. A lanyard hung at her chest with a contractor badge. Readiness Assessor. The laminate read, the company name small beneath it. No rank, no insignia, nothing for a Marine to salute and nothing for a Marine to fear. That was, Calloway decided, the whole problem with her. I asked you a question, he said, walking the rope line. You deaf or just lost? Neither, the woman said. One word. Flat. It landed wrong, somehow, and Calloway covered the wrongness with a laugh and a turn of his head toward the field. Petrie. Dolan. On me. We got a tourist. 4 Marines peeled off the track and came at a jog. Corporal Wade Petrie got there first, broad and pleased, a man who liked being called. Behind him came Lance Corporal Sean Dolan, the youngest, 20 years old, his laugh arriving a half-second after everyone else's. 2 more flanked wide. They did not rush. They fanned. They spread into a loose box around the woman in the pit, the way men do when they have done it before, and found it fun. The woman watched them do it. She did not watch their faces. She watched their feet. 5 men. She counted them once, and did not need to count again. 2 ways out of the pit, the gap at the rope where Calloway stood, and the open corner past Dolan, who was standing too square and too close, the way the young ones do. 11 meters to the rope. 30 to the cadre shed, where a gunnery sergeant stood with a clipboard of his own, and a stillness that did not match the morning. She logged the distances without moving her head. She had stood in smaller circles than this. She had stood in rooms with fewer doors and worse men, and she had learned that the arithmetic was the calm. You counted, and the counting kept your hands quiet. She had been in worse circles than this one, smaller rooms, fewer ways out. She did the arithmetic the way other people breathed. Walk away while you can, the woman said. She said it quietly. She said it the way a person reads a weather report. The box of Marines went still for a beat, and then the beat passed, and they laughed, because 5 is a number that makes men brave, and because a gray little contractor with a clipboard had just told a Marine Corps combatives instructor to walk away from his own pit. Walk away, Petrie repeated, delighted. You hear that? She's giving us a chance. He looked her up and down. Lady, the only thing you're qualified to assess around here is the chow line. They send you to count our calories. Maybe she's grading the grass, another one said. Calloway let it run. This was the part he liked, the part where the field watched him, and the watching made the morning his. He stepped over the rope into the sawdust, slow, taking his time, planting each boot. Tell you what, he said. You got 10 seconds to get behind that rope before my Marines escort you, and they are not gentle in the morning. The woman did not move to the rope. She lifted the clipboard against her hip, clicked a pen once, and wrote a single line. Then she looked up, past Calloway, past the box of grinning men, to the cadre shed 30 meters off, where Gunnery Sergeant Desmond Pope had stopped pretending to read his own clipboard and had gone very, very still. Pope had been a Marine for 18 years. He had seen tourists. He had seen contractors. He had seen the soft, harried civilians the readiness offices sent out to count things. And they all did the same thing in a circle of Marines. They got loud, or they got small. This one had done neither. This one had counted the exits. He had watched her eyes do it, and something old in the back of his neck had gone cold. Calloway clapped his hands. "Time's up." Pope set his clipboard down on the shed rail and started walking. The woman wrote one more line and waited. Calloway did not like waiting, and he did not like that the field had gone quieter than he had made it. He needed the morning back. So he did what men like him do when a thing will not flinch. He turned the moment into a test he was sure she would fail. "You're an assessor, right?" He pulled a stopwatch off his neck and held it out, dangling, mocking. "So assess. Go ahead, clipboard. Tell me what you see. Grade my Marines. Let's hear the expert." It was meant to break her. A civilian handed a stopwatch in front of a laughing platoon would fumble, squint at the runners, mumble something about teamwork, hand it back. Calloway had run this play before. He waited for the squint. The woman took the stopwatch. She did not look at it. She looked at the track. "Your interval is too short," she said. 40 seconds on, 20 off. You think it's building wind. It's building nothing. Your lead runner is at 6 minutes 40 per mile and dropping. He'll be at 7 by the third set because you've got him surging on the straights instead of holding pace. 3 of your men are out of step on the turn. The 4th from the front is favoring a left ankle and hiding it on the push-off. He'll be in medical inside a week if you keep loading him." The laughter thinned. The numbers came out of her flat and fast. No hunting for them, the way a person recites their own address. "Your pit's raked wrong," she went on, not unkindly, just precise. "Sawdust's pulled to the south corner. Anybody who goes down hard on the north side hits packed dirt under 2 centimeters of cover. That's how you get a cracked elbow and a log entry that says no significant findings." She said the last 4 words a little slower than the rest. Numbers were the language she trusted. Numbers did not posture. Numbers did not care how many men stood in a box, or how loud a staff sergeant could make a morning. They were simply true, and the truth of them sat in the cold air now and would not leave. She was not guessing, and she was not reading a magazine. She was reading the field the way a pilot reads weather, the whole moving system of it at once. Who was tired? Who was hurt? Who was hiding it? Where the ground would betray a man when he fell. It was the kind of seeing that takes a decade to build and cannot be faked for even a sentence. And it poured out of her in plain numbers, while a staff sergeant stood holding a stopwatch he had meant to embarrass her with. Pope arrived at the rope. He did not step in. He looked at the stopwatch in her hand, and then at the lead runner coming around the far turn, and he started his own count under his breath. 40 on. The runner surged the straight. 20 off. Pope reached the turn and looked at the man's gait and saw the left ankle hitch she had called from 30 meters with a clipboard against her hip. He had been doing this 18 years, and he had not seen the hitch until she named it. Now that she had, he could not unsee it, and he wondered, with the cold climbing his arms, what else she had already seen on his field that he had walked past for months. "Where'd you assess before this, ma'am?" Pope asked. Quiet. Just for her. The woman handed the stopwatch back to Calloway without looking at him. "Around," she said. 2 syllables. Pope felt the cold in his neck spread to his arms. He had asked a real question and gotten a wall, and the wall was the answer. Civilians explained themselves. They name-dropped offices and programs, and the colonel who sent them. They filled silence because silence frightened them. This woman wore silence like it was issued to her. Calloway snatched the stopwatch back and felt the morning slipping, and grabbed for it the only way he knew. "Lucky guesses," he announced to the field. "Anybody can read a running magazine. Doesn't make you a Marine." He turned to his men, performing now, rebuilding the grin. "We got ourselves a real expert, boys. Clipboard here's gonna fix the whole Corps, from the chow line." "Clipboard," Petrie echoed, testing it, liking it. Yeah, the nickname caught. That was how it worked. One man said it, and a second man repeated it. And by the third repetition, it was a thing the platoon owned. A small flag they could plant on her. Clipboard. The woman heard it land, and did not so much as shift her weight. She stood centered over both feet, hands loose, and let them name her, because a name they gave her was a name that told her exactly how little they knew. Pope stepped close to Calloway and dropped his voice so the field could not hear. "Staff Sergeant, ease off." Calloway looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Ease off a contractor? Gunny, she's wasting our training time. She's interference. You want to write that up? Be my guest." He raised his voice again, deliberate, so the woman would hear it. "She's a box checker. Sent here to slow us down. Ignore her, and she goes away." Pope did not answer. He stepped back. He looked at the woman, and the woman looked at him, and something passed between them that was not words. A recognition on his side, and on hers. The faint, patient acknowledgement of a person who has been recognized before and knows exactly what it costs. Pope walked back toward the shed slowly, and the reader could see him filing it all away, troubled, a man holding a fact too heavy for the morning. The mockery did not stop with the nickname. It found a second gear, the way these things do, and rolled from the man at its center out into the pack. A Marine lifted a phone, framed her in it, and the shutter sound clicked across the pit. 3 minutes later, it was in the platoon group chat with a caption Calloway read aloud to general delight. "The morning's tourist, come to grade the Marine Corps." The phones came out along the rope. The 5 fed on each other now, each one's laugh giving the next one permission, the circle of it tightening even as the men stood still. The woman tried to step out of the pit toward the cadre shed. Petrie drifted into her path. Not a shove. Nothing you could write down. Just a big man finding a reason to be where she wanted to walk. She changed her line by a half step. A second Marine drifted to fill the new gap, hands in his pockets, looking at the sky, deniable as weather. They had done this before. It was a game with rules everyone but the target had agreed to. Block the path, look innocent, make her ask, make her small. She did not ask. She did not bump a shoulder, or raise her voice or speed up. She let the wall form in front of her, and she stopped, unhurried. And she waited. And when the wall got bored and loosened, she moved through the gap it left and never once made it a fight. Her balance never broke. That was the thing Pope kept watching from the shed. Not what she did, but what she never did. She never lurched. She never reached. Her weight stayed centered over her feet, through every petty blockade like a thing bolted to the earth. And she wrote. Times. Names off the chess tapes she could read. Not threats. Observations in a small, neat hand. The clipboard filling with a record the laughing men could not imagine mattering. She was not raging. She was logging. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole story. And only Pope on that field understood which one he was watching. Dolan, the youngest, laughed a beat late again. He caught her eye once, just once, across the pit. And what he saw there was not fear and not anger, but a kind of quiet that made his stomach turn over. And he looked away fast and laughed louder to cover it. 20 years old. 3 weeks at this billet. Already he could feel that he was standing on the wrong side of something and did not yet have the spine to cross. Restraint on a field like that one Looks like surrender. The men read it as surrender. They were wrong, and being wrong felt exactly like being right. And that is the most dangerous feeling a person can have. If you have ever watched a good person get circled by people too small to recognize them, you already understand why this story matters. Stay with it. Subscribe to Honor Tales and watch what patience does to men who mistake it for weakness. Calloway, riding the high of the laughter, decided to make the morning permanent. "Tell you what," he called, spreading his arms to the field. "Since our visitor wants to assess Marine Corps standards, let's give her some standards to assess. Whole field. Welcome smoke session for the tourist." He grinned like it was a gift. A smoke session was punishment dressed as training. Push-ups to failure, mountain climbers, bear crawls in the cold dirt until somebody quit or got hurt. All of it off any schedule, none of it on any log. The platoon groaned because they would pay for her sin in burning shoulders, and the groan turned the field against her instead of him. That was the design. Calloway had run that play before, too. But before the field dropped, Calloway did one more thing, and it was the thing that would end him. He keyed his radio. He turned half away, but he did not lower his voice. He wanted her to hear it. "Duty hut, this is Calloway on the PT field. Got an unbadged civilian interfering with training, disrupting a session, requesting her gate access be flagged pending review. Yeah. Readiness contractor. No escort. Won't comply. Flag it." He clipped the radio back and smiled at her. "Your badge is under review. Congratulations. Your interference now. On the record." Then he made a show of the record itself. He walked to the cadre shed, pulled the combatives training log off its hook, a thick green binder, the field's official memory, and flipped it open against his forearm where she could see. He uncapped a pen. "Civilian interference," he narrated, writing. "Refused lawful instruction. Removed from training area." He signed it with a flourish. The woman watched him write, and her eyes did the thing again. They moved, once, across the field, in a single unhurried sweep. The radio on his belt. The gate camera on its pole, red light steady. The padlock hanging open on the cadre shed. The green binder against his arm. She read the binder the longest. Because the binder was thick, and most of its recent pages, she could see even at that distance, carried the same 4 words in the findings column, over and over, in Calloway's hand. No significant findings. And the field around her was full of men who limped. "How many in medical this month?" she asked. Not Calloway. Pope. Low, even. Just the 2 of them. Pope opened his mouth, closed it, said nothing. His silence was a full and terrible answer, and they both heard it. "You've got 10 minutes, Calloway said, hanging the binder back on its hook, "to be off my field." The woman lifted her left wrist and checked her watch. The watch face was turned inward, against the soft of her wrist. An old habit. The habit of a person who does not want light bouncing off glass in a dark place. The habit of someone who learned to read time without showing it. Pope saw the inward watch and felt the last of the morning's warmth leave him. "I have until tomorrow," the woman said. Calloway laughed. "Until tomorrow? Lady, you don't have 10 minutes. She did not explain. She let the strange sentence sit there, unexplained, and turned a fraction toward the hills where the road came in, and waited, as if tomorrow were a thing already on its way up that road in the dark. Pope could not let it go. He pulled Calloway aside, out past the rope, his back to the field so the men could not read his mouth. He had been a Marine for 18 years, and he had never in his life said what he was about to say to a junior man about a contractor with a clipboard. "Brett, listen to me. If she is who I think she is, you walk away. Right now. You hang that binder up, You take your Marines back to the track, and you forget this morning happened. Calloway stared at him. Who you think she is? She's a box checker, Gunny. She reads running magazines. You're letting her spook you. I asked her where she trained. She said around. Pope's jaw worked. I called her a tourist in my head for about 90 seconds. Then I watched her count the exits before she said a word. Civilians don't count exits, Brett. They count the minutes till they can leave. She counted ways out. So she's twitchy. She's not twitchy. She's calm. That's worse. Pope lowered his voice further. I've stood next to 2 people in my whole career who got that quiet in a circle of men, and both of them had done things I'm not cleared to know about. You hear me? Walk away. Calloway shook his head, and the shake was the sound of a man choosing his own ending. I'm not walking away from my own pit because you got a feeling. Pope went back to the field with the cold all the way through him now, and he did one more thing, a thing he would not have done if he were not certain. He walked the rope line to where the woman stood, and he said, "Lo," a single clipped phrase. Not a question anyone else would understand. A reference. A unit. A piece of tradecraft folded into 4 ordinary words. The kind of thing a man only says to find out if the other person says the right thing back. The woman answered without turning her head. 4 words back. Minimal. Correct. The countersign fit his reference the way a key fits a lock. Clean, no wasted motion. And then she was looking at the track again, as if nothing had passed between them at all. God help him, Pope said, very quietly, to himself. He understood now. Not the details. He would never have the details. But the shape of it. The woman in the gray clothes was not interference. She was the most senior person on that field, by a margin none of these men could imagine. And Calloway had just radioed to have her badge flagged and written her into the official log as a disruption, and somewhere up the road, tomorrow was coming. Pope went to the shed. He took the green binder down again, quietly, while Calloway played to the field. He turned to the medical cross-reference, the one Calloway never bothered with, and he started doing the math the woman had done in her head, comparing the names of the limping men to the no significant findings in the findings column. Lance Corporal with a cracked elbow, logged as nothing. Private with a concussion off a bad throw onto the packed north corner, logged as nothing. A junior Marine medevaxed 3 weeks ago who had not come back, whose entry read no significant findings in Calloway's clean, confident hand. He worked fast and quiet, the way a man works when he has finally admitted to himself what he is looking at. He ran his finger down the names and matched them to faces he saw every morning on the track. The Lance Corporal with the cracked elbow had been favoring it for a month. Pope had assumed a bad fall on liberty. The private who flinched at loud sounds and forgot the simple cadences. The man 3 weeks gone, whose rack still sat, made and empty in the squad bay, because no one had the heart to strip it. Every one of them in Calloway's hand, the same 4 words. No significant findings. Pope had walked past that binder 1,000 times and trusted the hand that filled it, because trusting the hand was easier than reading it. He was reading it now. His ears were hot with the shame of how long it had taken him. The woman stood in the pit and let the morning happen around her, immovable, centered, patient, while 30 meters away, a gunnery sergeant began to assemble the case that would end his own staff sergeant, because a contractor he could not name had asked him a single question, and he could no longer unhear it. Pope made one call from inside the shed. He cupped the phone and kept his voice under the field noise, and he asked the battalion office one thing, the only thing that mattered now. Who's taking over the combatives and survival cadre tomorrow morning? And what's the call sign? The line was quiet for a moment. Then the duty officer told him. And Gunnery Sergeant Desmond Pope, 18 years a Marine, sat down slowly on an ammunition crate in the dark of the shed and put his hand over his mouth. She had told Calloway the truth. She had until tomorrow, because tomorrow the field was hers. What the field could not know, what only the audience can be told, is who the woman in the gray clothes actually was. Her name was Renata Quill, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps, Marine Raider Regiment, call sign Viper 9. The contractor badge was real in the way a courtesy is real. She was inbound to take over this base's pre-deployment combatives and survival cadre, Calloway's cadre, Pope's cadre, the whole program, and her change of appointment was set for the following morning. She had a habit, older than her rank, of arriving a day early and unannounced, in clothes that told no one anything, to see a thing as it actually was before everyone in it knew to perform. She had wanted to know what kind of field she was inheriting. Now she knew. The name Viper 9 she had earned 7 years before, in 2019, on a coastal compound she had reached from the water at 2 in the morning. She had been a major then, 36 years old, leading a direct action element across 40 meters of black surf and a seawall and a courtyard, on a night with no moon and a hard wind that flattened the sound of their approach. The numbers of that night lived in her the way old scars live under skin. 11 minutes from the waterline to the breach point. 43 rounds. 200 meters of compound. 3 teammates. Then 2. Because she had lost one inside. His call sign was Gravel. He had gone through the far doorway to clear a room she could not see, and the building had come apart in noise and dust. And when it settled, the room was gone, and Gravel was gone with it. They had searched what they could in the minutes they had. They had found nothing to carry. The after-action listed him killed in action, body not recovered, and she had signed the line that made it official with a hand that did not shake, because she had taught it long ago not to. And she had carried the other one out. A teammate, call sign Drayton, with a wound through the leg that would not hold pressure, 400 meters back across the courtyard and the seawall and the black water to the extract, on her back for the last 100, counting her own breaths to keep her legs moving. She did not remember being afraid. She remembered counting. She remembered that the arithmetic was the only calm there was, and that the counting kept her hands quiet and her feet under her, and that Drayton had lived. She thought about that night more than she let anyone know. Not the fear of it. She could not find the fear in her memory, no matter how she reached for it. Only the cold and the count and the weight of Drayton's arm across her shoulders. What she carried was the doorway. The far doorway Gravel had stepped through. The one she had not been able to see. The half-second when the world had been whole and then was not. She had run the geometry of that compound 10,000 times in the years since. 11 minutes, 40 meters. The angle of the seawall. The second she might have called him back and did not. And the geometry never changed and never forgave. She had learned to live beside it. She had learned that grief, like fear, answers to counting, and that a person who keeps her hands quiet long enough can carry almost anything across almost any distance. They had given her the name after that. Viper 9. She had not asked for it. The men who gave it to her said it was because of how still she got before she moved, and how little she moved when she finally did. She had decided, somewhere in the years after, that the stillness was not a weapon she carried, but a vow she kept. That she would never lift a hand against a person unless the mission required it of her, because she had seen what hands could do, and she had decided her own would answer to something higher than her temper. It wasn't a limit on her. It was a line she had drawn, and the line was hers, and no staff sergeant on a cold PT field was going to move it for her. In a quiet she would not share with anyone on that field, Renata Quill took a worn photograph from an inner pocket. 3 Marines on a wet rooftop, grinning into a hard gray dawn. The picture creased to softness from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. The man on the left was gravel. She looked at it for the length of one breath. Then she folded it closed and put it away. She already knew the battalion commander was inbound at first light for her change of appointment. She had chosen to walk this field first, in the dark, in gray clothes, precisely so she could see the truth of it before the truth learned to hide. And she had seen it. She had seen a thick green binder full of the same 4 words, and a field full of men who limped, and a staff sergeant who owned a pit the way some men own the only thing they have ever been good at. Tomorrow was already in motion. It had been in motion before she ever stepped into the sawdust. All that remained was for the morning to arrive. The morning, for its part, was about to get there early. Calloway staged the smoke session like a master of ceremonies. Front-leaning rest position, he bellowed at the field, and then he turned to the woman in the pit and pointed at the dirt at her feet. You too, clipboard. You want to assess Marine Corps standards? Get down here and meet them, on your face. Now. The woman did not get down. No, she said. One word, even, without heat. I won't be doing that. The field went quiet. Refusal was not in the script. A man could laugh at a contractor who took it and wrote in a clipboard. A man did not know what to do with a contractor who simply, calmly declined. Calloway's face changed. The performance dropped off it, and something rawer came up underneath. The thing that had always been under the grin. A man who had built his whole small kingdom on the certainty that everyone in his pit did what he said. He crossed the sawdust in 3 steps. That wasn't a request. He reached out and took her by the collar of her jacket, his fist closing in the gray fabric at the back of her neck, and he hauled down and forward to put her on the ground in front of his Marines and the gate camera and the cold gray morning. She did not go down. She did not strike him. She did not break the grip. She did not throw him. Though every man there would later swear they did not understand why she hadn't, would lie awake on it, the way she had simply not moved. She set her weight. She stepped 1 boot back into the sawdust and dropped her center and stayed upright under his hand, the way a piling stays upright under a tide, and his haul found nothing to pull, no resistance to fight, no flinch to feed on. He pulled a person who would not be pulled, and the failure of it ran up his own arm and into his face, and he could not have said why his own strength had turned to water against a woman who never even tightened her jaw. His hand stayed knotted in her collar. He did not let go, because letting go in front of the field was its own kind of losing. So he stood there, gripping, hauling at nothing, and she stood there, centered, unmoved, and looked at him. You'll want to remember, she said, quiet and even, that you chose this. And then, for the first time all morning, she smiled at him. It was a small smile. It was not cruel. It was certain. It was the smile of a person who has already seen how a thing ends and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. And it unsettled Calloway more than any blow could have, because there is nothing on earth more frightening than calm where there should be fear. Pope was moving now, fast, off the shed and across the grass. Dolan had stopped laughing entirely. The young Marine stood frozen at the rope with his hands open at his sides, his whole face a question he was 20 years too young to answer. The other 3 had gone uncertain, their grins curdling, sensing without understanding that the morning had turned under their feet. Restraint is the most dangerous thing on a field full of men who only understand force. Calloway had his hand on a person who would not be moved, and he had not yet understood that the not moving was the trap, that her stillness was a door closing, slow and certain, on everything he was. His hand was still knotted in her collar when a vehicle door shut at the edge of the field. It was not a loud sound. just the solid, expensive thud of a heavy door closing in the cold, up by the road where the floodlights gave out. But it carried across the sawdust the way the wrong sound always carries, and every man on the field turned toward it. A figure was crossing the grass from a parked vehicle. Tall, unhurried, in a Marine Corps uniform that even at distance, even in the half-light, read as command, the bearing of a man who had never in his adult life had to ask twice for anything. As he came into the floodlights, the eagles on his collar caught the light. A colonel. And behind him, two more figures, staff, moving to keep up. Calloway's hand was still on her collar. The colonel's eyes found the pit, found the woman in gray, found the fist knotted in the back of her jacket. And his face did a thing none of the Marines had ever seen a colonel's face do. It went pale, and then it went hard, all the way hard, in the space of a single stride. "Viper 9, the colonel said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It crossed 40 meters of cold air and landed in the center of the pit like a round, and the whole field heard it, and the whole field did not understand it, except for one gunnery sergeant who had been waiting for exactly this and still felt his knees go loose. Calloway's head turned toward the colonel. "Sir, this civilian is interfering with—" "Take your hand," the colonel said, closing the last of the distance, "off my lieutenant colonel. Right now, staff sergeant." The words did not make sense to Calloway. He heard them. He could not assemble them. His hand was in the collar of a contractor named Clipboard, and a colonel was crossing his pit, calling her a call sign and a rank, and the two facts would not fit in the same world. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Renata Quill," the colonel said, and now he was inside the rope, and now his voice was for the whole field. "United States Marine Corps, Marine Raider Regiment. As of 0600 tomorrow, she is the officer in charge of this installation's combatives and survival cadre, which means, Staff Sergeant, that as of right now, you have your hand on the collar of the officer who is about to run your program. Let go." Calloway let go. His fingers opened one at a time, as if they belonged to someone else, and the gray fabric of her collar fell back into place, and his hand hung in the air a moment before it dropped to his side. And the audience could watch his face make the whole journey then, the 4 stations of it in order, with nowhere to hide. First confusion, the slack, uncomprehending blink of a man hearing words in the wrong order. Then disbelief, the small shake of the head, the no, the "this is a mistake." Then recognition, the awful dawning as the morning replayed itself behind his eyes at speed, the counting, the exits, the numbers off the track, the inward watch, the 4 words back to Pope, the smile, the "I have until tomorrow," every single thing she had done sliding now into a shape he could finally read, too late. And then, last, horror, pure and total. The face of a man standing in the wreckage of a building he himself had pulled down. Around the pit, every Marine came to attention. It went through them like wind through wheat. Petrie first, then the 2 on the flank, boots snapping together, spines straightening, eyes locking front, hands flattening against trouser seams. Dolan, at the rope, came to attention with tears standing in his eyes that he would never admit to. And at the back, by the shed, Gunnery Sergeant Pope was already there, already standing tall, eyes front, and as the field locked up around his ruined staff sergeant, Pope gave the smallest nod. Not to anyone, just to the cold morning, just to the fact of it. He had called it. He had been right, and being right had never felt worse. Lieutenant Colonel Renata Quill did not gloat. That was the thing the field would remember longest. Not the reveal, but what she did with it, which was almost nothing. She did not square up to Calloway. She did not raise her voice. She reached up and straightened the lanyard he had crumpled. and she bent and picked up the clipboard she had set down, and she turned to the colonel and spoke to him in the same flat brevity she had used all morning, as if the last 60 seconds had cost her exactly nothing, because they had. "Morning, sir. You're early." "So are you," Colonel Aaron Whitfield said. The hardness in his face had a grief under it, the particular grief of a man who has seen this woman in worse places and hoped she would get to walk onto an easy field just once. "Saw the lights. Figured I'd come watch you take a look around." His eyes moved over the pit, the limping men, the staff sergeant standing in pieces. "What am I looking at, Colonel?" She did not answer with an accusation. She answered the way she did everything, with a fact and a number and a thing you could check. "I'd like the combatives' training logs, sir," she said. "The green binder on the shed hook, and I'd like the medical cross-reference for the last 90 days. She looked at Calloway, without heat, without triumph, just steadily. "Staff Sergeant, bring me your log." This is the part the patient ones wait for. If it moved you, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay to the end, because the last thing she reads tonight changes everything. Calloway brought her the log. There was nothing else left for him to do. He took it off the hook with hands that had stopped working right and carried it across the sawdust and held it out. And she did not snatch it. She took it the way she took everything, without waste. And she opened it against her forearm exactly the way he had an hour before, when it was his weapon and not his confession. Pope was already there with the medical cross-reference. He had done the math in the dark of the shed, and he laid it open beside the log, and Quill did not even have to hunt. She turned the binder so that Calloway could see the page Pope had flagged, and she said, quietly, to him alone, "Now we read it together." And they read it. The cracked elbow off the packed north corner. No significant findings. The concussion off the bad throw. No significant findings. The private with the fractured wrist. The lance corporal who'd been carried off and quietly profiled. And the medevac 3 weeks gone. The junior Marine who had not come back. An off-the-schedule smoke session pushed past every standard until a body gave out. And in the findings column, in Calloway's clean, confident hand, the same 4 words he had written over a hospitalized Marine. No significant findings. There was no shouting in it. That was what undid Calloway most. There was no scene for him to push against. No anger he could call unfair. No raised voice he could later claim had rattled him into a mistake. There was only a woman reading a page he had written, turning it so he could see his own hand, naming each line in a flat, even voice, and waiting, between lines, while the cold did the work. She did not accuse him of a single thing. She simply read what he had recorded and let the gap between his 4 clean words and the limping men around the pit speak for itself. And there is no defense in the world against being read accurately by someone who has nothing to prove. It cascaded the way the truth does once the first true thing is said aloud. Whitfield's staff were already on their phones. By 0700 there were investigators on the field. The off-the-schedule sessions, the ones that lived in no log because Calloway had run them on the gap between the morning count and the start of training, came apart line by line as the medical dates were laid against the times the gate camera had him on the field. A pattern is only invisible, while no one lays the columns side by side. Someone had finally laid the columns side by side. The limping men, who had stayed silent for months because silence was how you survived Calloway's pit, began, one at a time, then in a line, to give statements, because the woman in gray had made it safe to, simply by standing in their circle and refusing to be moved. Calloway was relieved of his position where he stood, his name read off the cadre roster, and walked off his own field between 2 military police, past the rope, into the back of a vehicle, and he did not look back at the pit because the pit was no longer anything he owned. And then the youngest of the 5 did the bravest thing on that field. Lance Corporal Sean Dolan, 20 years old, 3 weeks at the billet, stepped forward out of the formation before anyone asked him to. His voice shook, and he let it shake. "Ma'am, I was there. This morning. And before." I laughed. He swallowed. "There were sessions that weren't on any schedule. I'll give a statement. All of it. I should have said something 3 weeks ago." Quill looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, once, and made a small note on the clipboard. The same clipboard, the same neat hand that had been logging the truth all morning while they called her a box checker. "You said it now," she said. "That counts. You'll give your statement to the investigators, and then you'll report to Gunnery Sergeant Pope. He's going to need junior leaders who'll tell him the truth when it's expensive." She held the boy's eyes. "Don't waste it." Dolan's jaw worked. "Yes, ma'am," Dolan said, and for the first time that morning his voice did not shake on the words. Pope came to stand beside her as the field thinned, as the investigators took the binder and the men and the morning apart into its true pieces. For a while, neither of them said anything. 2 people who had recognized each other across 30 meters of cold sawdust and had not needed many words then either. "He thought the pit was his," Pope said at last, watching the investigators carry the binder toward a waiting vehicle. 8 years he ran that field like it was his own country. "It was never his," Quill said. "It belonged to the men who limped across it and stayed quiet. He just stood in the middle of it loudest." She closed the clipboard. "That's all most of these men ever are. The loudest person standing in something that belongs to somebody else." "You knew," Pope said finally, "when you told him you had until tomorrow." "I knew the cadre was mine tomorrow," Quill said. "I didn't know about the log until I read his face when he wrote in it." A pause. "You did the medical math in the shed. Started to. You finished it." She looked at him. "That's why those men felt safe enough to talk, not me. You. You were the one who stayed 18 years and kept the door open. It was as close to praise as she came, and Pope took it like a medal, because from her, it was won. The next dawn, the field was hers. 0530. The same cold, the same frost at the edges of the grass, the same drooping rope around the same square of raked sawdust. Raked right this time, full cover to the corners. Lieutenant Colonel Renata Quill stood in the center of the pit in a Marine Corps uniform now, the eagles and the rank where they belonged, and she ran the cadre. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She called the intervals and the standards in the same flat, exact number she had used to read the field from behind a clipboard, and the Marines who had boxed her in the morning before now stood at her instruction and listened to every word. And one of them, Dolan, front rank, listened harder than the rest. That night, alone, she opened her laptop in the quarters they had given her. There was a message on a channel only a handful of people in the world had ever held. A channel that should have been dead for 7 years. The header was a call sign she had signed off as killed in action, with her own steady hand on a courtyard that no longer existed. Viper, this is gravel. Long time. Below it, a single image. A low gray building at the edge of a colder, grayer sea, salt-stained and windowless. A coastal black site she knew the shape of the way you know a scar. And beneath the image, a place. A named theater, half a world away, where a man she had buried was apparently, impossibly, still breathing. Renata Quill read it once, then she read it again. Outside her window the base went quiet, and the floodlights hummed over an empty field. She reached into her jacket and took out the worn photograph. 3 Marines on a wet rooftop, the man on the left grinning into a hard gray dawn. And she looked at it for a long, long moment, while the gray sea held on the screen. She did not call anyone. Not yet. She folded the photograph closed and set it beside the laptop. and she sat very still in the dark, centered, patient, the way she got before she moved. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.